Welcome to another episode of Off Script with Rip. I'm your host, Ryan Ripken, and this is a podcast where I bring on guests from a variety of different industries to talk about their journeys. And regardless of the paths or the career choices that they make, I promise you, if you listen to the conversations, there are many things that you can relate and resonate with. But for some reason, if that doesn't do it for you, there are a lot of great stories as well to listen to. And today's guest is American broadcaster, and he's the play-by-play, or how I like to view him, the voice of the Baltimore Ravens. That is Gerry Sandusky. And personally to me, Gerry is one of the best in the business. Now, Gerry has been at the local news station WBAL, which is an NBC affiliate, since 1988 in Baltimore City. And actually, Gerry attended Towson University, which is located right outside of Baltimore City as well. Gerry has ties to the area, but this is not where he called home to start off his life. And actually, this isn't even where his broadcasting career even began. So I can't wait for you to listen to this interview because Gerry, to me, just one, has a great story, and also just to see the evolution of Gerry becoming a person that didn't know exactly what he wanted to do to being one of the best in his industry. And also, Gerry is always polished. Even if it's supposed to be off script, he always has his act together, and he is a fabulous storyteller. So without further ado, here is Gerry Sandusky. How's it going, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Off Script, and my guest for this episode is Gerry Sandusky. And for those of you who don't recognize Gerry, his face, which you would if you're in the Baltimore area, you definitely recognize his voice as being the play-by-play radio for the Baltimore Ravens. Gerry, I'm so glad you're able to come on. Thank you for taking the time. You're a busy guy.
Great to be with you. Listen, the voice has become a really funny thing because I now say I can't commit a crime in this town because I will be identified by my voice.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things when I was growing up, Chuck Thompson had the voice for the Colts and the Orioles. And so like that was a voice I grew up with. And when people reflect back to me now that my voice has this imprint on them, it's a humbling thing.
Yeah, no, you've now taken over that responsibility. The ones that resonated for you, Chuck resonated for you, you have now started this whole new trend, especially for the Baltimore community. But I'll say it's amazing. I mean, your catchphrase is everything. The hay's in the barn. It gives me goosebumps. You've been through all of it. But yeah, let's just keep you out of trouble as much as possible if we can.
Because I'm easy to catch.
Yeah. So in general, for also, just so everyone knows too, you also do presentations, consulting. You've been trying to mentor me through this next journey in my life in the whole media realm.
And here's the difference that Ryan is apart from most people. There are lots of people that ask you for advice. Not many people take it. Most people want to have done what you do. You actually put in the work. It's fun to watch you grow in a very short period of time in a linear fashion. Most people grow in kind of a serpentine fashion. Like, I'll do this for a while, but I think I want to be a stockbroker. Nah, I think I want to be a designer. I'm going to be an architect. And they're all over the map. You had an idea of where you wanted to go in your career, and you talked to a lot of people. You got good advice, and now you do the reps. You're putting in the work, and that's unique, and that's why you're going to go places.
I appreciate it. I mean, it's funny though. Gerry's fluffing me up here because. And that's going to lead into the next segment here. But just to close on that, I'm still trying to figure it out. It's such a work in progress.
Welcome to the club.
Oh man, and that's kind of what life's all about, right? It's it's this whole journey. As soon as you think you have something kind of figured out, you go into a whole different world. And
so let me put it in context for you. How old are you now?
29.
Perfect. So when I first came to Baltimore, I was 28, and television was the thing.
Yeah,
and it was the king. Local and network. And that's as big as it got. And because there was nothing else. The internet didn't exist. Social media didn't exist. Instagram didn't exist. So it was literally a different world than we occupy today. So great. When I'm 28, 29, I'm trying to figure this thing out. I thought, by 30, 35, I'll have this figured out. Well, the minute you think you have it figured out, the landscape changes.
Right.
And you're not in the world that you were 5 years ago. So you never really figure it out. You just keep acquiring skills and finding new ways to use those skills.
Well, and that's extremely well put. And I think that's something for the longest time, I think, where people get stuck, or at least how I have. You will put so much time and effort into a specific thing. And for me, it was baseball. It was trying to perfect my craft. It was working on different drills, and also if things that I needed to get better at. And it was a constant evolving process. And still now it's jumping into a completely different subject and going into something that am not as familiar with. And you're nervous, you're scared. And I think everyone can kind of relate to, but it also is going to bring me back because I want to know a little bit more about how you got into all this, because even though you are one of the most polished, and honestly, to me, for what the ones that don't know you, I think you are one of the best sports broadcasters out there.
Thank you.
But taking you back to the beginning, you went to Towson University. Obviously, we talked about before off screen about being a football and basketball guy. Did you have an idea about going into this type of industry?
No, believe it or not. So I was a finance and economics major in college. And I just thought I would work in business or something. I thought you went to college, you got a business degree, you became a businessman. It was just like my limited scope of thinking. I knew I wasn't going to be a pro athlete. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that was my father was an NFL coach. Mm-hmm. And so by the time I was 15 and 16, being around players, working at training camps, I recognized they had a DNA strand that I didn't have. They had a speed, a quickness, and ability. And so I wasn't one of those guys who thought, I'm going to make it, because I knew I didn't have that level of tools.
Right.
I played very marginally in college. I always joke, in college basketball, I sat so far down on the bench, they called it the suburbs. And in football, I was on the travel squad, but I rarely got into any games. And on the drives back, like 6-hour bus rides, I would be in the back of the bus, and I would do this make-believe post-game show, mm-hmm. where I would do this kind of make-believe show about what took place, and guys would come in, and I'd make them my guests. It was kind of like what we're doing now with a podcast, but it was just totally make-believe. And it became very fun and entertaining. Guys wanted to be on the show. And so after a road trip once, Phil Albert, our head coach, I went up to him, another game I didn't get into, and I said, Coach, how come I'm not playing? He said, well, I'll be honest with you, Gerry, you're just not quite good enough for me to put you in right now. I said, well, then why do you bring me on these road trips? He said, I bring you on these road trips because your teammates love that stupid post-game show you do. So stop bothering me, get in the back of the bus and do the show. And so that was like my first exposure to broadcasting. But when I got out of college, I started to interview for jobs.
Yeah.
Insurance jobs, sales jobs, broker jobs. And two trends emerged. One, I didn't really like any of the jobs that were on the table. And two, I wasn't offered any of the jobs that were on the table.
Then that also makes it hard to start working if you don't get offered the job.
Correct. And so the bell goes off, and I'm talking with a career counselor, and she says, all right, if you could have any job in the world and you knew you couldn't fail, what would you take? And my answer was, I would host The Tonight Show. And she said, well, then maybe business isn't for you just yet. Maybe you should think about TV. And so sometimes what you don't know is the best thing in the world. Mm-hmm. I didn't know you could launch a TV career this way.
Right.
I went to Miami, where my parents live, South Florida, knocked on TV station doors, and asked for an internship. Mm-hmm. They all said, well, you have to be in school. So, well, I'm a graduate. Yeah, you're not. You have to be in school. So back in the day when they had cigarette matches, on the back of one of those was the Brown Institute of Broadcasting. It was a disc jockey school in Fort Lauderdale. I signed up at a disc jockey school. I would go to disc jockey school in the morning. I would drive down to the TV station in Miami at night, because once I was in school, I could get an internship. And when I got the internship, they said, well, we don't actually have a program, but you're welcome to hang out. So I literally hung out at a TV station for a year and a half, doing a lot of what you're doing right now, mm-hmm. learning about microphones, learning about lighting, learning about scripting, learning about how shows flow. And then one day, a year and a half in, I'll never forget this, I was ready to quit. Mm-hmm. Whether you're in sports and broadcasting and business, we all have that moment you're ready to quit. And I'm driving home, and I'm thinking to myself, God, my friends are getting married, they're getting jobs, they're making money. I'm America's first millennial. I live at home with my parents, I have a college degree, and I'm borrowing gas money from my dad. I mean, talk about a loser. I'm quitting. I'm driving back to Baltimore tomorrow, enough of this. And I get home. And my ritual at night, I would come home, I would take the 11 o'clock news scripts, I would stand in front of the mirror in the bathroom, and I would practice reading the scripts, trying to teach myself how to read like a newscaster. And I got home that night, and on my desk was a white gooseneck lamp with a red bow and a card. And I opened the card and it said, I know how hard you're working on your dreams. I hope this shines a little light on them. Love, Mom. I literally changed the course of my life. I went back to the TV station the next day, and I've been going back for 38 years ever since.
That's not where I expected this to fully get unpacked, but wow. I think there's so many ways to unpack it. First off, the perseverance and the dedication, because I think a common theme that I always feel, and I'm kind of going through that stage of life now where I don't I don't know what I wanted to do. I just finished something off, and like you thought you had it planned out in college, and then you realized that it wasn't the path.
Yep.
And then even for this, it's hard getting this up and going, as we talked about before.
Yeah.
And it can be very disheartening at times because you feel like you're not making a lot of progress. And it sounds like when you hear those types of stories, if you stick with what you're doing, and you stick with it, and you're going to need the pushes. And I'm glad your mom, I get pushed a lot by my mom quite often. And sometimes it feels like it can be too much, but no matter what, she's doing it with their best interest. Same thing with my girlfriend. They understand, and you need that support system. And so I think it's good for people to remember that no matter what you're doing, that those people can be the light for you moving forward. So
that keeps your just one foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to get stuck.
Yeah.
It's so easy to just stall and feel sorry for yourself. But if you just get that nut, you don't need somebody to put a rocket behind you and fly you, a million miles an hour. You literally just need somebody to remind you, just take the next step.
Yeah.
Just take the next step. Because eventually what happens is all the people you think you're competing with, they give up.
Right.
They stop taking the step, and you stand out, and that's when you get noticed. And so the roundabout conclusion to that story was a year and a half into the TV station, one day an editor doesn't show up. Hey, can you edit? Yep, I've learned how to do that on my free time. Good, you got a part-time job, you're an editor. Another day a producer doesn't show up. Can you produce? Oh, I know how to produce. Now I have a part-time job as an editor and a producer. And then one day a reporter didn't show up, and they needed somebody to go do a feature. The Pro Bowling Tour was in town. Like, I'm not talking, it wasn't a Super Bowl story. It was a pro bowling story, and it was a pro bowler feature on a pro bowler. I remember to this day, Bill Handley, gentleman Bill Handley. And I went out and I did the feature story, and it aired that night. And the news director said, hey, that's really good. Do another one tomorrow. One step. And I just kept showing up.
I want to touch on that with showing up and going to work, but also being diligent and focusing on your surroundings and trying to get better at different components. Because going as an intern, I think when we head in, you think it's one specific job per se for some people. You're going in to learn one skill. For you, you're constantly were looking at how could I get my foot in the door, right? Am I hearing that correct?
Totally.
And so I think that's some things when you think your path's looking one way, make sure to keep your eyes a little further open to the possibilities. So you got your opportunity. It worked out. It built it off another. And then eventually, how did you end up coming up to WBAL in Baltimore?
So my brother Jim lived in Baltimore. Chris Thomas, who was the 11 o'clock sportscaster, was taking a job in Tampa. So there was an opening. And Jim, he said, hey, there's an opening here. You should send up a tape. And so I took a resume tape. I sent it up here. And the station was looking for somebody who had Baltimore roots. I wasn't very good at the time. And I was very green. I'd been a full-time anchor for about a month, 6 weeks. So I just kind of put it out there, figured get some experience in interviewing for a job if I get an interview. I got an interview. They gave me an offer. I turned it down. I didn't like the offer. I kept my job in Miami. And 6 months later, they came back and gave me a better offer, and I came to Baltimore.
And so that's how it was. And then obviously you had a little bit more experience. You came up here, and now you just are talking about it's 35 years later.
Yeah.
And the whole evolution.
That's the wild part.
So that's the thing. It's in the moment when things go by and you're telling these stories, it feels like things can be so long. Things can be dragged out. Things can feel when the things are going wrong, when times are tough, they feel like everything is prolonged. Everything is on top of you. Can you touch a little bit on that, where the journey takes time and eventually you're going to look up and look back at the body of work, but you're going to get through these tougher periods. And clearly you did, for everything that happened to get your start.
Well, you've heard the expression, the days are long, but the years are short.
Yeah.
And there's been plenty of long days in 35 years.
Right.
But 35 years all of a sudden goes by so fast because when we first got here, my wife and I were married. We celebrated our first wedding anniversary here. And we were struggling. We just moved from South Florida. My wife didn't necessarily have many friends here. We didn't know a lot of it. It was a tough thing early in your marriage.
Right.
And then we started to get a little traction, and then we had a family. And as much as we struggled as younger people, once we had kids, this became this great place to raise a family. I mean, this is a great. I just think Baltimore's a great town to raise a family. It's just built for that.
I agree with that.
I don't think it's a great singles town. I wouldn't want to be a single guy here because it's just not. It's a family town. Like the schools are really good, and as our kids got older, they thrived in school. And in our house, my daughter paid me one of the great compliments. She's 32 now, but she said, I think I was like 30 years old before I ever realized, this is her talking, that I wasn't the star of the family. And my son felt the same way. My job was to be the dad of the games, and in my neighborhood, I was Mr. Gerry. I made pancakes on the weekends, and that was, it was a late discovery before anybody who grew up with my kids found out I was on TV.
Right.
And that was by design. And you get so caught up in the flow of that. And then you look up and 35 years have gone by.
Yeah.
Because that really was the focus of, I had some opportunities. And then just as my career really hit the point where maybe I was going to get a shot for national play-by-play, the whole Gerry Sandusky thing comes down the pike. Now, look, you can plan your career out all you want. I can promise you nobody's ever going to say, oh, by the way, and just when you're ready to get the big break, somebody with your exact sounding name is going to commit the crime that makes it the most hated name in America.
And by a landslide. And that's still to this day, when you bring it, if someone brings up, oh, Gerry Sandusky, it's hesitation, right?
Oh, yes.
No matter what.
Yes, I have a 6-word mantra, Gerry with a G, no relation.
I was looking up, even if you Google your name and even go on to Wikipedia and whatnot, the first line that says there is no relationship, there's no connection with the Gerry Sandusky from Penn State.
My Twitter handle, my Instagram handle, all nope, Gerry with a G.
Yeah,
no relation.
It's maddening, and for you, I understand it can be so frustrating. On a different sense, for me growing up, as far as when people hear Ripken, they automatically it draws a You think about, well, wait a minute, is it related to a family? And again, for different cases, I'd much rather have my situation where I go, are you related to one of those Ripkins? Yes,
but it's still a weight.
Yeah,
it's still a weight that's not part of your identity, and I can share that. Look, I grew up. My dad was John Sandusky. He was assistant coach for the Colts for years, and then he was an interim head coach for a year. So, and I know you'll relate to this.
Yep.
You grow up in that world, and you can't tell, is that guy my friend because he likes me or because of my dad?
Right.
And it's always been something that I wrestled with as a kid growing up. To this day, I don't make friends that easily. And the friends I have, I really hold on to.
Right.
Because you just can't tell. Are they playing at an angle? And it's a weight. You had to deal with that.
Yeah.
And it really forces you to develop a discerning eye to who authentic people are.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing for you, especially in this industry, when you're going into the TV world, you're being, seen daily. How are you able to then combat that on a day-to-day basis? Obviously, you can talk about you're trying to protect your family. You're trying to make it feel more comfortable. And I can surely relate to that component because my family wanted to try to protect from all the outside noise. And I didn't even understand the full perceptions or the reality of and the magnitude of things that my family had accomplished until I was older. And that's testament to with my family. But I'm sure the same thing. Like, how did you go about that then where not only your family felt comfortable, but you as an individual that you could go out there and I don't necessarily say you're going to trust somebody, but then that you could feel open enough to show people, the real Gerry Sandusky.
So I think you limit the number of people who you really open up to.
Mm-hmm.
Like we have this kind of running joke in our family. Like people think they want to know me. You don't want to know me. You want to know my wife, Leanne. Because Leanne's the one who's got this really big heart. She's an amazing gift giver. She loves people. I'm actually more reserved. I'm the introvert.
Yeah.
And the true test is the pandemic. When you came through the pandemic, you found out if you were an introvert or an extrovert.
Mm-hmm.
Like, believe it, I wasn't that bothered by the pandemic. I did my shows at home. I had my job. I did what I had to do. It was fine. It was torture for my wife because she's a true extrovert. Mm-hmm. She loves to be around people.
Right.
And so that was 2 years of agony for her. And so I've always been actually much more selective with who I reveal, who I'm really, what I like to do, what I really think about things. Because you learn that if you share that too much with too many people that you can't trust, it's going to come back and bite you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good way because the reason why I asked, because I always felt guarded initially. And to your point, actually a lot of my close friends from early on in my life were the ones that I started with when I was 6 years old. And obviously you make a ton of friends moving forward. But at that age, at being 6 and I was 6 years old and my other friends being 6, they didn't understand kind of all the perception. So I felt that we were going through life and they didn't understand the magnitude. And as I went further on, people always would look at the name first for me and go, well, I'm curious about, what is the connection here? So there's always that pause. With my younger friends, there wasn't. It was, that's Ryan.
That's Ryan.
That's Ryan. And that was a relieving experience. And I didn't think anything of it until I got older. But that's a whole part of the thing. And that's not me complaining, not worrying, but
no,
it's
it's the journey. Because here's the thing you learn with the people who authentically know you.
Yeah.
It's your first name first, your last name last.
Mm-hmm.
For the people who don't really know you, it's your last name first and your first name last.
Yeah.
That's the tell to me.
Right.
Like when somebody walks into my house for the first time, they're like, hey, I really like your work with the Ravens. That's lovely to compliment me, but that means you don't know me.
Right.
Because we don't talk about the Ravens in my house.
Yeah.
We talk about the kids. We talk about the grocery shop. We talk about the house projects I haven't gotten to. We talk about the stuff you talk about at home.
Right.
And so the people who come into your home, that's what you talk about.
Yeah.
Like when people come into your home and the first thing they want to talk about is 2131, that's a red flag.
Oh yeah, especially I get the question all the time. How much did you enjoy that night? I go, well, the lights were on, no one was home. I was 2 years old.
Right, exactly.
Oh, you remember the whole night, the celebration? Nope. Oh, I saw you on the parade. That's great. I heard I looked cute, but I don't remember it. But the same concept.
That's the tell. So that's now the it sounds like it's a struggle, but the flip side is you really do learn who likes you for you.
Yeah.
Here's something, not to get too deep, but this will get deep. It's your struggles in your life that really distill out the BS.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was 17, my older brother Joe, who was like my icon, he died. He played college football at Tulsa, and he died of sepsis. Life into flukes. The shoulder pad caused a cyst on his shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
The pneumococcus germ that causes pneumonia should go to your chest, got into his system and went to his heart, and he killed him the next day.
Wow.
So, all of a sudden, literally your life's blown up.
Right.
You've had this pretty idyllic life,
mm-hmm.
and then all of a sudden you're that kid. Like your world has blown up. And I remember vividly at his funeral. I'll never, this is like foundational in my life. Huge turnout, everybody's sad. But they all leave the funeral.
Mm-hmm.
And there's only a handful of people who are left with their hand in the casket, who are just going to stay with you.
Right.
And those are the people who you want in your life.
Right.
I don't mean to diminish everybody else who attended.
No.
But at 17, I learned the lesson that you'll have maybe 5 people in your life who you can count on not looking at their watch at your funeral. And those are the people you want to devote your time to.
Yeah. And that is really deep. And, obviously, it's especially in the traumatic moments of your life that were it's true colors is not the right phrase, but it's more of you understand who's in your corner.
Totally.
And
look, adversity is the only thing that can teach you that.
Yeah.
We all want success. We all want the championship ring. We all want the parade. We all want pats on the back. But, really, those moments really don't teach you much.
Right.
They're great to have. They're fun to celebrate. They're fun to reflect back on. But that's not what makes you who you are.
Yeah. When the going gets tough and you have your back against the wall.
And a lot of people get going.
Yeah. And who's pushing with you on your back to try to push you forward back into wherever else you're trying to go? Who's helping you get back to what you want to be or who you are? And that's a hard thing. I've noticed so much, and I still consider myself a young guy, and
you are,
and that's the thing is I know that I've mentioned this before. I don't understand. I guess when you're a kid, you think, well, 30 is so old. I'm like, well, I'm going to be 30 next year. But then you get older and you go, man, there's so much more to life that's available. But even already in that point, I can feel that. I mean, for me, the early 20s was extremely challenging. And I was trying to find out myself. I was trying to get my professional career going. And at times I felt like people didn't understand. Were those moments besides what you dealt with that, I don't know, was there a struggle period in your earlier life? Obviously.
Oh yeah.
When you got in professionally, even though it's a great story to get into, but there had to have been some of these with all the good moments that you're creating besides.
Sure. Poser syndrome. I think you hit on something. I think your early and mid 20s are probably the most challenging part of your life that people don't realize and talk about. We all talk about the 20s because you're physically your paragon, your peak. No matter what you do, you don't have to even do much. You're peak, you feel good, you look good, you can get by on a late night and 4 hours of sleep, and like you can sail through life physically. But it's mentally, emotionally, spiritually, it's such a challenging time because man, you feel like you're in a blender. You don't know what's going on. So early in my TV career, as I'm just getting some footing going, I mean, every day was showing up like you've had to learn to do here. You show up like, okay, do I know how to look at that camera? I don't feel so good today. Do I look right? And so you have just this endless battle of doubt. So you've got to not only learn to professionally put your best foot forward, talk to a camera, be in the environment, not be distracted, be all over the map, but you got to fight this sense of self-doubt of, who the hell am I to be doing this?
Yeah. That's the biggest thing, the self-doubt, the voice that's going on in your head, where it's so easy. I mean, if no one has had that other inner voice that's been telling you the opposite or really getting on you, then you're lying to yourself, because I can't tell you how many times, even on the simple thing for me, I went to work out today, and I had the problem of, I had the thought of, well, you know what, you don't have to do it. I don't want to do it. And why do you need to do that? And then even now producing this podcast, well, why do this? Where is it going to lead to? Is it going to give you? And you think, well, aren't you? And you think, well, I'm supposed to be on my side here, but it happens
all the time. Very first live shot I ever did.
Yeah.
It was in Miami Beach. I don't even remember who was boxing in the match, but I was just jacked up because I'm going to be on live TV for the first time. Like,
fired up, yeah.
You just, your heart's racing. And you're like, can I do this? You don't sleep the night before. I'm in the middle of the live shot. I'm looking at the camera. It's about 1:15 is how much time they budgeted. I'm 45 seconds. It's going along great. And if I remember this 45 seconds, like a bell went off, all of a sudden, the back of my head saying, who the hell are you to be on live TV? What are you doing? You're an idiot. There's no reason for you to be on live TV. And these are my thoughts while my mouth was talking about the boxing match. And I got done that. I was wiped out. I was so exhausted because it was like I was fighting myself.
Yeah.
And I went back and I looked at the tape, and luckily what I said came out half intelligent. Like it wasn't.
It worked at least.
Right,
yeah.
It passed for the moment, but I had to learn how to get past all of this internal struggle so that I could just have a conversation with the camera.
Well, so what'd you tell yourself? What was kind of a cue? Because I have the same thing they say with baseball when not going into a batter's box. I'm stepping in, and as soon as this other thought comes in where I'm thinking about what is what's going on there, or I have any doubt of, well, I'm not seeing it well, or is he going to throw this, or what if I get out? I go, wait a minute, step out time. Say to myself, like,
you're in your head.
Yeah, what I would tell myself is maybe it'd be a little bit more, if I would be nice to myself that day, it was like, hey, focusing on one thought. Or if I was really having trouble, it'd be a little bit harder on myself and be maybe a few expletives and say, focus on one thing. Just do it. And then it'd be like, all right, back in. So was there a cue for you that you had to, that helped you, get through that?
So early on, for some reason, I was interviewing a doctor. I think it was about a sports medicine injury thing. And then we got talking, and then we were joking afterwards. And he said, yeah, I guess the difference between our jobs is, we both work in sports. And the doctor said, if I have a really bad day, somebody could die. If you have a really bad day, it just feels like somebody's going to die. And I thought, oh my God, that's genius. And that just flipped a light because, look, if you have a bad day talking to the camera, yeah, it feels like you're going to die, but you don't die.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized, what's the worst thing that can happen? Okay, Gerry went sideways and started cussing. Cut it. We'll have to edit it. Or I forgot what I was going to say, and we'll go back and read. So what?
Yeah.
The sun's coming up tomorrow. Your mother still loves you. You still have a great girlfriend.
Right.
It's all going to go on.
Yeah.
And once I learned to take that pressure off, I recognized that what we're doing is just a conversation.
Yeah.
We're just sharing our story. And when you do it with a camera, that camera is one person.
Right.
So you learn to relate to the camera the way you relate to a person, and that changes everything.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's really, this is like music to my ears because this is something I've always struggled with. But the worries, I think we always think the worst. Every single day we worry about what other people are going to think of you, how embarrassed the moment is. But truly, all that's happening is that you are imagining the worst things possible, and it's not the same what's happening in reality. And if it is, so what? And I think that's a lot of people why don't follow through on certain things with their dreams and their hopes, is because their own thoughts and their perceptions diminish their goals, and the reality is that's not what you should do. You were put here on, if you thought you were going to be a broadcaster, go give it a go, and if it doesn't work out,
it doesn't work out. Right.
But I think that's the thing is I think it's so simple that way. If it doesn't work, okay. It doesn't work out.
Right.
But everyone else, the fear of something else happening, that another result is what drives people, I feel like, to not do it.
Because like we were talking about earlier, we tend to project into the future the way life is today.
Yeah.
And the example of that is, what if your broadcasting career doesn't work out at 29?
Right.
Well, guess what? At 61, broadcasting's not even remotely what it once was.
Right.
That's the mistake we all make. Whether we're 25 or 35 or 61, we all think the world as it exists today is how it's going to be 5, 10, 15. No. When I was your age, nobody even thought of the internet. If I had to call and make a quick call, I couldn't get on my cell phone because they hadn't invented that. Mm-hmm. I couldn't open my laptop. You're using 2 Mac laptops and Rode equipment for this podcast. That stuff didn't exist. Laptops did not exist when I was your age. And I don't say that to me, man, this guy's really old, but just so you recognize that 3 decades down the road, this isn't what you're going to be doing. But the skills you learned in the batting cage, the skills you learned on the field, the skills you learn in the chair with a microphone, you'll be using them all in some completely different capacity. That's if you learn to stay relevant, learn how to learn, and learn how to keep applying the lessons you've learned, life just somehow keeps paving a road in front of you. If you stop learning, it's a hard stop sign.
Yeah, and that's another hard thing where it can be terrifying to say, well, times are changing, things are evolving. What do I do? How do I do it? Well, it doesn't have to be a big thing. It can be a small thing. I can't tell you how much even trying to edit, put together even this small thing where my head initially, it was so overwhelming to do it. Totally. But in the moment, but then when I thought about it, I go, well, that got better. Yeah, that got better that day. I got a little bit better the next day. I got a little bit better the next day. And all of a sudden now, I'm going, wait a minute. This is how this all come together, and it kind of clicked. Well, it didn't happen all at once, but like you said, it all came together eventually. When you pick your head up, things work out differently. And also, you're right. There are things that you pick up on yourself of, well, hey, I'm going to try this differently. This works better. And you're right. The evolution of that's just the world's not going to stop evolving. No matter what we do, it's going to keep going. I wanted to move forward just a little bit with, as you brought up, obviously, with the whole situation with Penn State Gerry. We're done on that subject, but because then you finally got into with the Ravens, and obviously that has been one of the for me being in Baltimore, it's been one of the most iconic. You have been the most iconic voice to listen to. When you finally got that opportunity, what was that moment? What was the first year like for you? Was it nerves, excitement, all the above?
So the month I get the job, my dad dies. And the last thing I said to my dad was, I made it to the NFL too. It was just such a powerful thing because it was something that I had wanted for a long time. And so to share that with him at the end of his life was really, really meaningful. And as I went into that, man, the first year was such a challenge because, like everything else new, I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I had an idea, I had a framework, I'd been in broadcasting, but you remember your first pro baseball game, man, it all moves a lot faster than you saw on TV.
Yep.
And same thing with the broadcast. Like all of a sudden the games, I've seen a lot of football, and all of a sudden this thing is going at warp speed. And so the first broadcast I get done, I was just relieved I got it done, and I didn't get fired. Like, okay, all right, that was not great, but we'll do better next week. And so every week is like this steep learning curve. You're always like, man, is this ever going to get easier? And it does get easier, but you're always learning.
Yeah.
But that first year, and the thing you have to deal with in these positions is everybody's a critic. Literally everybody but you can do a better job at this podcast. Did you know that yet?
I'm figuring it out. Yep.
Everybody can do a better job of play-by-play than the guy or the woman who's doing the play-by-play. And ironically, they've never even remotely ventured into this realm. But they all know and they want to criticize it. So you have to develop this ability to just allow people their space to say what they want to say and not internalize it.
Yeah.
And that would eventually help me, help my family through the whole Gerry Sandusky ordeal. Because, by then there is social media. By then you are getting bombarded. And by then, but it teaches you not arrogance, but this sense of self-defense that, look, this was my dream. This wasn't yours. And you can say what you want, but I'm going to hold on to my dream.
Yeah.
And I'm going to keep working at it, and I'm going to get better at this. And maybe one day I'll be so good you'll like me. But you know what? Even then, I don't really care because this was my dream.
Right.
And that's really what that first couple of years was.
Yeah.
And I would spend a lot of time with other people who I knew were really good at it. The very first year, I sent an email out to all 31 other play-by-play guys in the NFL, introduced myself, and I asked, give me 3 pieces of advice. About 8 or 9 of them, who I'm still friends with, replied, gave me some great advice, and I started to build on that. And I just kept doing that. I just, to this day, I still reach out to people and say, hey, how do you handle this situation? How would you do that? And you just learn to learn. And if you love learning, which I do, it just kind of makes the journey more enjoyable.
Yeah, I mean, that's like the critics thing. I couldn't agree more with, and especially nowadays, it's so easy to be able to go on social media, and that's where people in this day and age where it can be so toxic. It can do so many wonderful things, and we could talk about how you can go on and you can grow your own brand, you can grow a platform, you can reach other people and make a difference, and hopefully someone listens or enjoys what you present. But on the flip side, it's a lot of spaces for criticism, and that can be daunting, that can be frustrating, but at the same time,
you can't let it stop you.
No.
And one of the things with criticism, it's always consider the source.
Mm-hmm.
So if, hypothetical situation, if the guy who lives down the street who is a financial analyst criticizes the way you handle yourself in your podcast,
mm-hmm.
that shouldn't mean nearly as much to you as if Oprah does.
Right.
Because Oprah is the queen of the space.
Yep.
The guy down the street, he's just a guy with an opinion, but he doesn't understand all that you did on the journey just to get here. And so you really have to learn some criticism is going to be valuable, because if Oprah tells you, hey, do this, this, and this, that's just right. I'm going to do that. And you just get better. If it's just toxic, man, it's just other people, their bag of stuff, and they're trying to dump it on you. You just got to learn to.
You can't control it, even though it's so easy to want to in the moment put something out there. And we've seen a lot. I mean, personally, I've witnessed it being around a lot of guys in the professional world. And even you go on if you go on any of the news or something pops up where a player makes a comment because a fan might have crossed the line and it felt good at the time. And we've seen it this past year and NFL season a lot. It happens in every sport. It's not the NFL, right. But it happens. And the person that always is being criticized, usually in these cases, is the one that has more to lose. And I think that's where, if you take a step back it's I think one of the biggest advice I got is, if you're going to tweet something out or tweet or write or say something, read it over, wait 5 more seconds, read it again, and then sit for 30 seconds. If you feel that this isn't going to be right, don't send it. Give yourself an extra time to know, because once it's out there, it's not going away. Someone's going to get a hold of it, no matter, even if you quickly delete it.
There's no deleting in the digital space.
It's somewhere.
I mean, it's some corner somewhere. Someone's going to find it. It'll be on Mars when we settle there, we're driving our Teslas on Mars in 35 years. That tweet that you regret will be right there.
It's going to be there.
That's just the nature of it. So you're right. The only tweet that doesn't come out to do that is the one you don't hit send on.
Yeah.
You just learn but again, we're much more sensitized to that because we've been on the receiving end of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want anything I do on social media to hurt somebody.
Yeah.
But those people who do that, they're not thinking about that. They're just lashing out and being thoughtless. I have an opinion. That's great, buddy. I have an opinion too, but it doesn't need to be out there all the time.
No. So then you're saying about it took a few years to get comfortable, with the Ravens and moving on. At the point, was there a specific moment where you realized I found my voice with the team? Did you come into a point of a confidence, or was it just an overtime?
It was just
where
gradual.
You went?
I can't point to one game or one moment or one one experience. The thing that really started to stand out to me early on is that when you really love what you do, you'll take positives away from things that people won't even see or hear. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I discovered in the first probably third of my career doing play-by-play was some of my favorite broadcasts nobody ever brings up because the Ravens lost. I can't control the outcome, but I can control the input. Yeah. And sometimes like our broadcasters really work that day. Yeah. But nobody even thinks about it because, they lost that day to Denver or whoever, And everybody always thinks your favorite broadcasts are your biggest games. Yeah. It's not really the case. Like the Denver Mile High game was a great call and Jacoby Jones and all that. But honestly, it was a miserable day because it was like 20 below zero. My hands are like frozen. I'm bleeding. I've had brain chills. It was not a pleasant experience. And then the Super Bowl, I had bronchitis.
That was a tough playoff stretch for you right there.
Right. So but how many guys in sports and women in sports have you heard have the same thing? Like by the end of the season, everybody's playing injured, including the play-by-play guy. So I've never listened to the Super Bowl broadcast because I was so sick that day. I hated the feel of my voice. I don't even want to hear what it sounded like.
It's interesting. I can relate to that, but you're right. Everyone goes through things every single day, but you still got to go in there. And even if you might feel it's not your best work, you got to show up.
You can't say, I don't want to do the Super Bowl today. You just
I'm going to sit this one out. Let me know next time we come through. It'll be great. I'll be there.
Because guess what? It might not be next time.
No.
And the other thing, the big games teach you to really cherish all the games.
Right.
Like the big game, the Super Bowl, the big stage, that was really great. But it was still a game.
Yeah.
And you recognize, again, you go back in the Super Bowl, everybody's your buddy. Right. You're somebody now. They all want to be around. And God, when the ring shows up, they're really your buddy. I kind of want to be around the people who care during the preseason game.
Yeah.
Because those are the five. Those are the people who really care. Mm-hmm. And that's, as you get older, that's what you treasure.
Yeah. You know what I was always curious about, because this is something that even just doing a little bit on WBAL in the mornings, the improvisation, being able to go with the flow or something happens. I'm sure you've had countless moments where something happened, or even in sporting events. I mean, even it was a very tragic scene, but with Buffalo and the Bills, the whole Damar Hamlin situation, being able to navigate that and just watching on Monday Night Football with Joe Buck and Troy Aikman and the entire staff, that's the extreme of having to deal with unforeseen circumstances. But even on other things, how do you tell yourself to handle the unknown?
So you don't tell yourself, and that's the thing, because if you start telling yourself, you're not present. The art of it is to be completely present. It's the thing I love most about a Ravens broadcast. Mm-hmm. For 3 hours, I'm nowhere else. I'm not worrying about the bills. I'm not worrying. I mean the Buffalo Bills. I mean the financial bills. I'm not worried about what do my kids need. I'm not worried about what am I getting my wife for her birthday. I'm not worried about all those things that are important. But for those 3 hours, nothing penetrates my thoughts but being in the moment. And if you're completely present, you can adapt to anything. Whether it's a Damar Hamlin situation that Joe Buck handled brilliantly, and the ESPN crew handled brilliantly because they were all present. They didn't try to project what was going to happen. Yeah. They weren't 3 minutes behind. They were just in the moment. If you think about the word presentation, the majority of that word is present. Mm-hmm. And when you give people the present of your presence, you're able to adapt to whatever the moment gives you because you're not thinking about 3 minutes from now or 3 minutes ago. And that means you've got to be able to move past mistakes. Yeah. You're going to make mistakes. I've never had a flawless broadcast.
And you never will.
And so you've got to learn the Ted Lasso line, the shortest memory is a goldfish. It's 9 seconds. Yeah. Be a goldfish, whether you're playing for Ted Lasso or you're on a broadcaster. And so as you do that, you can be constantly present so that if something happens, like if we're doing this podcast and a fox jumps through the window, we can actually talk about that because we're literally present. If one of the lights goes out, we don't have to stop the show. We can just talk about the fact that the lights go out and we fold that in because you're present. Yeah. It's when people have their mental energy in the past or in the future that they get all tangled up. But when you're actually just present, just talk about what happens in the moment and you're in the moment, and that's what connects with the audience.
And that's one of the most simplest things, but it's sometimes the hardest thing to follow. is to stay in the present moment, because we always want to think about what has either happened in our past or what could happen in the future. I mean, I remember this was, it would bother me to no end about, I kept trying to think and project my future. And when I wasn't playing well, it was well, what if I don't play well tomorrow? Or am I going to play tomorrow? What if I don't have a hit for a week? Am I going to get released? Am I going to, at the time, was I going to get drafted? Or, everything in between. And actually, when I did get released by the or Nationals, and I had the moment where it was like, you know what, I want to enjoy what I'm doing, because there's no guarantee I can do it again.
Right.
But to your point, though, that after it was in 2017, I had the most fun I had with baseball that year in years. And it all had to do with I was there.
Right. You were there.
I was there witnessing it. And, that's something where I go, man, that's just, again, when you say it out loud, it is one of the most simple things. Be present.
But when you're day to day, and because our minds get busy and we live in our mind, you just kind of have to bring your energy down, more to a heart-centered level, to just be present. What sports psychologists came up with that great phrase that I find very helpful: just be where your feet are. Your feet are right here, right now, doing this show, sitting in that chair. Be here.
Yeah.
You can't worry about what's going to happen at 10 o'clock tonight. You can't worry about breakfast. Just be right here. And then tomorrow morning at breakfast, that's where your feet are. Be at breakfast. So if you just be where your feet are, it kind of brings your thoughts right back into that moment. And that thing we were talking about earlier, where like 90% of the stuff you worry about never happens anyway, you stop worrying about it.
Yeah. And it's true. It feels like it just disappears. And you feel the stress that you thought was there, it's gone. And you feel way lighter. Yep. You feel, and even you sleep better at night. I don't sleep well in general, but that's just because for many different, I'm a night owl, Gerry, in general. I stay up late.
You're telling a guy who has worked the late shift for 35 years.
Okay, so you get it. You know exactly. But it's funny because maybe that will get better over time. But sleeping aside, I have those moments where it just, when I know I'm here, I can feel, like, you can actually feel it. And I think that's an awesome thing to realize. So everything happened with the Ravens. There has to have been, I'm going to get into kind of some quick hitters here as we wrap up. There has to have been some fun times. Like, what's a place that you love to go to if you're in the NFL, or it doesn't have to be
Seattle? I love Seattle. Great city to visit. Really fun, eclectic, fun. We always go out there a day early. I'm bummed that the Chargers moved to L.A. because I don't love L.A. and I love San Diego.
San Diego's
a great town. Really love San Diego. Dallas is a great stadium. I don't love the town that much, but it's a fun stadium. Minneapolis is a really cool town, especially if you play a September, October, August game. That's a great town to explore. Hidden gems, Detroit, the stadium in Detroit, Ford Field, great stadium that people don't recognize. I think that's a terrific one. And then South Florida, I like to go to games there just because I grew up in South Florida, so that always kind of
it hits home for you. So then, what about where was I going to go with this? We'll just start. Well, since it's Baltimore, you're with the Ravens. What's your gut say with Lamar?
My gut says Lamar is going to push the guarantee too far, and that they'll have to use the franchise tag to get him to wake up a little bit, and they may even have to use the threat of a trade. And my hope is the threat of a trade gets Lamar to negotiate a little bit, because look, here's the reality of it is. Yeah. The Roquan Smith deal tells you what should happen with Lamar. And they were fortunate enough, they used round numbers. Roquan Smith, $100 million, they guaranteed 60% of it. Yep. Lamar wants 100% guarantee. Lamar wants 100, they guaranteed Roquan 60, meet him at 80, and the deal's done. 70 to 80% guarantee should be the sweet spot of the deal. Any good agent will tell you that. Mm-hmm. The question is Lamar getting that kind of advice? Lamar's looking at Deshaun Watson saying, well, he got a fully guaranteed deal, but Watson's the outlier. He should look at Patrick Mahomes and say, hey, he's gone to 5 AFC championships and won 2 Super Bowls, and he doesn't have a 100% guarantee. So that's the more true deal. And if you take that and the Roquan Smith, 70 to 80% guarantee, that should be the number, and everybody should be able to come to terms on that.
Yeah, I mean, and it's hard. The business side of it is challenging because as a player, I get it. People want to look, you're trying, it's your livelihood. And I talked about in the past, one of my good friends, Darius Jennings in the NFL, he talked about with the business, and sometimes it can be personal, but at the same
I think
time,
it's always personal because it's your life.
Yeah.
No, people, it's just business, not personal. That's bull.
Yeah.
It's your life. How is your business and your life not personal? I'm sorry. To me, it's totally personal.
Yeah. Well, then the other part then would be what people sometimes forget. It's the team. They're trying to do the best thing for the team.
Yes.
Lamar's trying to do the best thing for himself. Not that he doesn't want to win. He wants to win. He wants to do, but there's other things. It's talking about your personal, it's livelihood. This is something you've dedicated your craft to. You have the opportunity. You want to try to set yourself up and your family up for years to come.
But we all have to be careful not to let ego get in the way of the best outcome. So when we talk about livelihood, when you're playing in minor leagues, you're not talking about generational wealth.
Mm-hmm.
When you're coming up and broadcasting, you're talking about a decent living for that year for your family.
Yeah.
When you're talking about 150 million or 240 million, the lowest end of that is generational wealth.
Right.
Now it's a function of what's fair, I get that, and what do I want? And life has a really funny way of humbling if you get too caught up in what you want.
Yeah. That's a good point. It's you can't take certain things in life for granted, and there's certain things that people will try to do the best for you, and to your point, there can be a lot of humbling moments that you don't want to miss out on. And I hope in this case with Baltimore, I hope everything works out. He's exciting to watch. Love the team.
It's the best fit. Him here, become a lifetime Raven, new offensive coordinator. The pieces are on the puzzle. You got this great defense. Again, you got this window.
Yeah.
And as a player, you want that to be attractive. But, Lamar should be able to get everything he wants from here unless he wants the unrealistic deal, which they've already said they're not going to give him. So you just got to kind of learn to meet somewhere toward the middle.
Well, let's hope, because that's the biggest question mark in the offseason. And honestly, I think it's going to work out either way. The organization has done a great job. But again, seeing number 8 in the purple and black would be amazing. So last thing then, we've had a ton of quotes and advice for the entire session. But do you have one for yourself, best piece of advice you've had with adversity, best piece something that you live by each and every day?
A couple. The biggest one is it's all temporary. Keep that in mind. It's temporary.
Mm-hmm.
There's an end.
Yeah.
Everybody has a birth date and a date of death, and it's that dash in the middle. And what am I doing with the dash today?
Yeah.
Because you don't know if it's a short dash, is it a long dash? But they all have an end. And when you reach the end, it's too late to go back and work on your legacy. So figure out your legacy now and then live in that direction.
Wow. That's temporary. It goes back to all the things where everything sometimes, can feel permanent, that it's everlasting, that you can never get out of it. I think I actually might have seen something recently pop up with Tom Hanks piece. He goes, he wished when he was younger that he learned that when things were going really bad, this too shall pass. When things are going really well and you think you got it all figured out, that too's going to pass. And and for me, isn't that crazy? But that just started. It's unlocking in my brain right now. Yeah. It's temporary. Yeah. What you're feeling right now, good or bad, is going to come and go.
Circumstances around you are temporary. The economy is temporary. Whether you're having a struggle financially or things are coming your way, it's temporary. Emotionally, spirit, it's literally temporary. And so don't get too attached to the things that don't last.
I think that's a great way to end this. So, Gerry, I can't thank you enough. I'm sure I'll bother you about something in the future.
It's no bother.
But thank you for coming on, and that does it for Off Script, and I'll see you next time. That does it for episode 3 of Off Script with Rip. I hope you enjoyed the interview with Gerry Sandusky. And if you did, please like and subscribe, as well as leave a review. All of the feedback is tremendous for me, and my ultimate goal is to make this podcast better for all the listeners out there. So thank you again, and I will see you next week for Off Script with Rip.